Welcome to Property Careers Prospector School Online, the second instalment. Today we're going to talk fundamentally about planning. You'll receive, if you haven't already, a copy of a plan that we've put in place after, if you listen to the first session that we ran around breaking into the market or breaking bad on presence. And we talked about the foothold component. So just recapping very quickly, we're going to go through three phases. The intention or the intent is to break into a marketplace. So break it for the first time to become, again, reiterating, a player. So it's the players that control 60 to 90% of any given market. And the rest are contenders. So whether you're a contender or you're not, or whether you're an aspiring player, or whether you're a player and you're trying to stamp your foot permanently to move forward from having some degree of market share, it doesn't really matter. Foothold is about breaking into a market or re-establishing presence. And the fundamental guise that we're running here is to get that presence in play. Now, I always say there's two great sadnesses about, actually having goals. So if you actually haven't sat down or you begin any endeavor without understanding where you're trying to get to, where your destination is, you're in a whole lot of strife. And they say, the sad part about planning is or goal setting, I should say, is never to have had one or ever to have reached one. So everything starts with understanding where you're trying to go. And this is going to sound like a really strange analogy, but if you will, I want you to imagine that you've decided to catch a train to the office or anywhere for that matter. So you know where your destination is. Now, you wouldn't go down to that train station and literally just hop on the first train that comes to the platform. Number one, you'd want to make sure that the direction of the train is where you want to go. Number two, you'd want to make sure that that train is going to reach that destination and is going to stop so you can get off, because what you don't want to do is fly straight past that destination and end up in the wrong place either. This is hence the phrase when people say you're on the wrong train. You'd want to know what time that train leaves. You'd most likely want to get there before the train is due to arrive and not find yourself rushing or scrambling to just make the train. As crazy as this analogy might sound to you right now, when I look at people in the real estate industry that are trying to accomplish something, they're not real sure on their destination. In fact, they use this horrible phrase that frightens the bejesus out of me, to be honest. They'll say, so how many listings do you want to find? How soon do you expect to succeed? Questions like this. And they'll say, well, I'll just see how it goes, or I'll do my best, or I'll try. In the great words of Yoda, in Star Wars, as crazy as this might sound to you, Yoda said, do or do not do. There is no try, So you've got to understand what it is that you're trying to do, and then turn that into becoming committed to do it, to driving towards a predetermined destination that is going to add up to you being successful in your own regard. Yep. So what we say is that you need to stop and think about what it is that you're going to do well before you tackle that issue at all. And whilst we do the planning for you, for me, it's fundamentally important that you understand why the plan exists and how important it is to you reaching that goal. But then I'm going to contradict myself here in saying that, sometimes you just have to abandon the plan. So when I look at any endeavor, I spend a lot more time thinking about what I'm going to do before I go ahead and do it. If we follow on from what we spoke about last week, I openly say that, you've just got to understand how to break the whole endeavor down into bite-sized chunks. And to me, and I hope you're taking notes and followed my advice last year, and I just ask you to write this down. First and foremost, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. What does that mean? Well, if you are here starting out in your real estate career and you deem this to be the destination at this point, given the number of, prospective sellers, active property sellers, as we talk about, that you identify first and then, pass on for someone to secure an appointment so we can go and see you and talk to them about listing their property for sale with you. So once you get that number of people worked out, that equals success. Now, I say the shortest distance between where you are at today and here is a straight line. Yet so often, especially with other training regimes, they tend to go the long way around it. They kind of anticipate or create, if you like, obstacles that aren't even there yet. And for me, I like to actually make all these considerations before I even start. As I openly said to you the last time we got together on here, that I'm naturally lazy. So I look at any endeavor. It doesn't mean I'm not prepared to work towards something. It doesn't mean I'm not prepared to do whatever it takes to succeed. But I like to quantify that whatever it takes first and find the shortest route around it. So from what we talked about last week, we said, the priority, your success, it doesn't really matter what you've heard, said, or done. Your success will be clearly determined by the number of active property sellers you can identify. And given that we know that not everyone's going to be suited to our product, given that we know on capacity that not everyone's going to select us as their agent, I say the aim for prospecting should not be enough. It should be surplus. That we're going to aim to run a strategy which allows us strategically to have a surplus of opportunities, more opportunities than we actually need. This gives us the luxury of then saying, well, if we miss a few, that's not going to matter. Or more importantly, if we don't want certain listings, eventually we don't necessarily have to take them. Now, getting back to that analogy around planning and eliminating the obstacles, what we need to do in planning is spend a lot more time thinking. So if you write these 3 words in succession, think. Second word, plan. Third one, execute. Now, if you look at those 3 words, think, plan, execute, I've got to tell you that most people, when they look at any endeavor, they try to think about it for a little while. They don't really put any solid plan together and they just go at it. So people tend to go directly to execution. That seems to be the most important thing to them. And, in execution, you can find yourself doing a whole lot of work without a lot of result. Now, the other reason we want to have a plan in place is not just to follow it, but also to identify, to be clear about what may not be working. So you go think, plan, execute. Now, if you're not getting the desired result, if it's not working out the way that you see, a lot of people saying, you hear this other maximum, I just wanted to dispel this one for you. They say, stick to the plan. If it's not working, stick to the plan. Or in some cases, they go, just go harder, work harder. This is insane. This is total insanity. If I find even for a second that something that I'm doing isn't working, I immediately scrap that plan and go back to rethinking it. So the thing I would like you to write down and get your head around here is never, ever, under any circumstance, never stick to the plan, or worse, change the goal change the destination to suit the plan. Instead, what you do is you change the plan to suit the goal. So I throw it out. So let me give you this metaphor that hopefully explains this for you in context. If you were catching that train and actually, why don't we move away from it, come back to my favorite. Let's say that you were jumping into a car. So you would get up at a predetermined time and you wanted to come to the office by 9 a.m. Would you go down, get into the car, put the key into the ignition, start the car, shut your eyes, hit the accelerator and say, I'll see how I go? Now, to me, I liken that to working at something without a plan. It's the very same thing. And I see a lot of people doing this. Now, we know that you wouldn't do this every day. What you would do instead is you would open your eyes, you would start the vehicle, and you would navigate that vehicle, my guess, in the shortest and most direct route that you knew of to get there. So you can see that we naturally think about the goal and we think of the shortest distance between that objective. How can we get there in the shortest space of time efficiently? And of course, if you were driving along and all of a sudden there was a traffic break or something that was in the way, you wouldn't pull the car over to the side of the road and sit there and say, okay, I'm in a bit of trouble here. I'm going to have to wait for this traffic jam to die down or wait for this roadblock to subside. No, you would stop. You would think how you could get around that obstacle back on track toward the destination. So this is the representative of what I've just talked about, where I say, well, I wouldn't change the goal to suit the plan. Similarly, if you were driving and all of a sudden you would plan to be there at 9 o'clock and you looked at your watch and you thought, it's almost 9, I'm going to be late, you wouldn't look to the side and see another office or another company and say, you know what, I'm just going to have to pull in there today and announce to them that I couldn't reach my office in time. So this will just have to do. You wouldn't compromise the goal to suit the plan. You would, in fact, change the plan to suit the goal. Now, these are very important factors that we understand, and then you always literally plan to get to the destination a little ahead of time, a little earlier, allowing for any contingencies or any problems that might occur. How does this all translate? Well, in most plans that I put together, if I have a goal, for argument's sake, just moving this across to listings, which is probably new to some of you, but if I have a goal of 12 listings for the month, one of the first things that I do is I break every month down into 28 days. This is important because to me, every month fits into that nice, neat 4 full week time slot. Those in-between days, I allow those that if I achieve my goals, I can goof off on those days if I choose to. Again, lazy. Or even better, I can sometimes use those to get a head start on the month ahead. So I can rack up some results on the 29th, 30th, or 31st in some cases. And being able to do that means that I can start the month already having achieved some goals. I always like to be ahead of the game. Even further to that, one of my next maxims, and I ask you to write this down in planning, is to achieve half the goal in a third of the time. Getting back to that number of 12 listings for the month, that would mean that, if there's 30 days in a month, even though I'm calling it 28, around the 10th of the month, if I had a goal of 12 listings, I would expect to be at 6 listings by the 10th of the month. And a lot of people say, why is that so important? Well, let's look at it. In any sporting endeavor that I've been involved in, I know that I'm least effective when I'm fatigued. And at the end of each month, at the end of each endeavor, if I start to fall behind on the numbers I need to get, I can be subjected to thinking about giving up or worried or just want to wait to reset for the next month. Whereas if I'm absolutely resolute to achieve half the goal by the 10th, I've got plenty of time for smooth sailing if things start to slow, to readjust, to allow for contingencies. So that's another little safety measure I put in there. Now you might probably all thinking, I thought this guy was lazy. Well, again, I say to you, I am very lazy. But by premeditating all of the things that could go wrong, I am proactively determining my outcome. I never leave anything to chance. I embrace it on the breakdown and understand the steps, the incremental steps I have to make in order to get there. So if we bring this all the way back to the beginning, if you don't know where you want to go in the beginning, and unless you've accepted that goal and you fully believe it, then the chances of you achieving it are going to be a complete accident. And let me explain to you that what the mind conceives and believes becomes its reality. So your brain only accepts something as being real because you tell it it's real. So this also means that you can play some tricks on it where you can preconceive the outcomes. Getting all the way back to the plan, for some reason, and I use the example of getting into the car and driving to a predetermined destination, how we get there ahead of time, how we get around any obstacles, how we never change the destination or the goal, if you like, to suit the plan. We change the plan to suit the goal. And it shows you how you are capable, more than capable of doing it. The reason I'm pre-framing this is when I introduce you to the actuality of the practical application of the plan that we have for you in breaking into a market and establishing presence. Your understanding of this is absolutely tantamount. You can't just look at it and say, I'll just join the dots and everything should be okay. So often it's not what you say in these conditions, it's how you say the things that make all the difference in a gauge for your success around this. So when I talk about this plan and, sort of last week, we got up to the point where we talked about an introduction to it. We got in and talked about the functionality. So I just want to expand on this just a little bit more, the red, black, blue. And we said that, red tasks are essential. Yeah, they're necessary, but they're non-income producing. And that in foothold, you'll feel like you're doing a lot of those things, but there's just not immediate results. But building presence is building a perception with the intent of that becoming a reality. And what we're desperately trying to do is to get into the blue area where we win some seed listings. And from those listings, we can turn 1 into 2, 2 into 4, and so on. And there are plenty of examples, even right here, right now. I can talk about people that have joined us that have, for some of you have been where you've been. Kyle, at the moment, I know that you're on fire, mate. Absolutely killing it. Sean, we want to crack something there and get it going, but you've got the general feel for how it works and what can be done in and around that. So, and again, if you even just change your mindset and get in control of that mindset to move forward, you're on fire. Having a plan, having premeditated your actions and the desired outcome gives you that liberated feeling. So I hope that after last week, we all got on board and got these little components worked out. I hope that many of you, and I know that some of you have done that, where you've jumped into the marketplace that you've looked at. I know that we've made some adjustments for a couple of you because the number of properties that you were looking at were not enough to give you the capacity to get the desired outcome you want from it. This is one of the analogies that I use. I make it very, very clear, roughly. And if you are writing something down there, you can do this. The reality is the most number of sales that you can anticipate is 20 per 1,000. So if you're prospecting an area that only has 1,000 properties, the most sales that you can drain out of that you can squeeze out of that, if you like, over a 12-month period is 20. So if you have a goal, that says you want to hit 40, 50 sales per annum, you're going to need more properties to make that work. You can't get 2 glasses of orange juice out of 1 orange. It really is that simple. So you must understand that capacity. And by telling the brain that the capacity is there, it sees the reality, it makes that judgment around it, and you will be energized to go ahead and run with the plan that you put in place. I didn't give this a lot of credence last week, but it's important that once you've actually decided on the area that you're looking at, you need to have a visual map, geographical map of that area. Because what the mind can see, it can deal with. What you're seeing in your mind's eye, which you are constantly relating to visualization, makes the whole endeavor to go. I know this all sounds a bit hokey pokey to you, but to me, it's altogether necessary to ensuring there's every conceivable chance of success moving forward. So once you've got those areas in place, this is how the plan then starts to unfold. We want to bust it up. Hopefully you've got a minimum of about 2,000 properties, and you might want to break that, given that you're working 5 days a week, into 5 sectors, and utilizing those 5 sectors. Some of you have decided to just break it down into 4 and do the deliveries around 4 days. I have no problem with that. It's actually smart, really. So it allows for any contingencies. And then we focus on the main arterial roads. The main arterial roads are imperative to success in creating presence. And let me explain why. You see, for people that live in the quieter locations in any geographic precinct, they have to frequent the main roads to get in and out of those areas. So if we focus on prospecting the main roads and we're successful in winning listing opportunities and or marketing opportunities, presence opportunities around our signs, if we can get 3 to 5 signs on main arterial roads, this will create the perception for all of the people that live in there that you have strong presence in the area, because they're passing. If you've got 3 signs, they're passing your sign 6 times a day. And there is a subliminal intake that's related to this. You should then go to property management. Some of you will talk about this, and ask, once you've been allocated an area, go to the property manager and ask if we manage any properties on main arterial roads, and then ask permission to contact the landlord and ask them for a promotional signboard. You can come back and use this dialogue. I'll just give you a quick example of it, or even call me up and I'll show you exactly what to do and say with these people. So I call a landlord up and I'll just say, "Hi, my name's Mark. I'm from ABC Realty. I understand we manage your property." And they say, "Yeah, look, sorry to bother you. I was just wondering if you could help me." And they'll say, "Yes." I said, "Do you want to sell it?" That would be my first line. Do you want to sell it? Now, you'll learn later on when we get into dialogue around landlords that every property landlord is actually an investor. And as investors, whether they articulate this to you or not, they're always selling. So if you say, "Do you want to sell it?" their immediate response is most likely to be, "How much?" To which I would then openly respond, "Well, when can I see it?" And they would say, "Well, why?" I said, "Well, look, I was just checking to see if you wanted to sell it. But in the event that you weren't, I was wondering if you could help me by allowing me to put a promotional sign up for a month. I'm just kickstarting in that particular area. Although we've got properties that we manage, we're intending to take a greater market share and work a bit harder in that area. And we really like to utilize your property for sign presence." And if they then turn around and say, "Well, they're not sure," I say, "Well, look, how about during the period that we have it up, we give you free management fees for a month?" They'll most likely say, "How long do you want to leave it up there for?" So that's another one that you can try. The for sale card. Now, this is something that is a replica of your for sale sign. This one is absolutely imperative in getting out there into the market. I'll expand on this the next time we talk next week. But the for sale card is a scaled down on card. It must be on card because it must look and feel like a miniature signboard, if you like, replication, double-sided, of your for sale sign. If there's any alteration you want to make to it, maybe on one side you might just have a sold sticker across the for sale. And we put these out into the marketplace with great regularity. They deliberately have no call to action on them. I will expand on this and explain this as we start to move forward. But the whole idea is that when sellers, property owners, I should say, pick them up, they look at it, they look for the call to action, they don't see it, and then they just discard it. Fine with me. For people that are selling, it's making them aware of your presence. And even for those that are in dormancy, if you remember last week, a dormant property owner is always interested in the state of the market and what their property might be worth. But because there's no call to action, they won't call you up, but there is a subliminal intake with it. And that you have your property market already. We'll be explaining that further as we go. And some sort of business, a calling card. And then we just want to focus on these primary protocols. So what we're looking at, and again, I'll come back to these next week. I just want to talk about the art of planning and showing you how this works well for you to be effective and why it is we can take a 30% market share, why it is we can become a player in the marketplace in less than 13 weeks. So we have those sign cards, which I've already talked about as a protocol. We have another one that I'll be explaining to you is called Amazing Grace. Its whole premise is to secure signage presence on main arterial roads. I'll show you how we did that. It's so named after an agent that was down on the Melbourne Peninsula. Her name is Grace Ball, and she started an agency in an area where they had no presence. And within 3 months, they became a player. They are now clearly the #1 dominant agent in that area and have been for nearly 3 years now. Fat Boy One is another one that's designed to get main roads. I'll be explaining that as we go. And there's a follow-on to that, the newsletters, and then a just listed card that we use for other agents. So you can even be getting listing inquiry off the back of your competitors' listings. It's a very stealth way of doing it. It's totally ethical and totally legal. But when you see it in action, I think you'll be pretty surprised. And there'll be some secondary protocols that we'll be talking about for sale by owners in particular. Once you receive this, I've even got some videos where you can start to study this. I can tell you now, once you become proficient and expert in getting for sale by owners to consider and indeed list their properties with you, everything else gets pretty easy, because sometimes these guys are the most, critical in some ways of agents, because for sale by owners tend to sell themselves. People that want to sell their property on their own without the assistance of an agent, they typically do this because they deem agents to be too expensive. So they just don't want to pay the money. They want to save the fee. And they don't do that, by the way, which I'll explain to you as we go. They definitely don't save the fee, because the buyers, when they see there's no agent involved, they expect that the property can be discounted by that at least. So effectively, they save the fee and the private seller doesn't. And the second reason they don't sell with agents is because they've usually had a bad experience. Well, we don't want that to be you. We want to show you how to behave in a manner that's conducive to people wanting to list their property with you. And we'll go through that. Same with to let by owners. I gave you a bit of an insight there when I just talked about ringing your own company's landlords that may have properties on main arterial roads. But I can show you how to actually approach those that are trying to rent or lease their property out on their own, and how they are usually more than receptive to help you market presence in any given area. And withdrawn listings is something else that we'll go into. And then most notably is what we call other agent signs down. We attack this with what we call put the message in the box to begin with, and then we establish a connection with them. And I can show you how, if the other agent is not successful, to ensure that you and your company are first cab off the rank. Again, this all has a correlation to premeditated behavior. So you can see that what we're doing here is, and we're setting up the weekly schedule. So I believe you've got to look at any plan that you put in place contextually, which is what this does, week by week, what the objectives are, what we want to do, or what we want to achieve around establishing presence. And then you break it down, not from weekly, all the way down to day by day behavior, even to the point of knowing this is what I do in the mornings, this is what I do in the afternoons. Now, what I will say to you inside this plan, as we start to break it down and we actually give it particulars, it's important that you do understand what you're doing before you do it. Those of you that have already started and engaged on this plan without really delving into the detail around it, don't panic, because the reality is this plan has not been proven once. It's been proven hundreds of times. It might even be towards the thousands now. And it works. That's not to say that it can't be further refined, because we're further refining it all the time. But what it does suggest, if you're engaging in this and you're questioning any part of it, all you're doing is inviting further difficulty or more time into the equation. You see, the success of this plan is not any element of it in isolation. It is the sum of its parts. And I ask that you do not ignore that factor. So usually when people come to me, they'll say, look, I've been following it and it's not delivering. If they say that, I'll start to question them fundamentally around this contextual stuff right here. I'll say, what components have you done, or what components have you failed to do? And invariably they'll point to certain things and they'll say, well, I don't do that, or worse, I think someone else in the company does that. Do not leave any of this to chance, because I'll say it again, the success of the plan is not anything in isolation. It is the sum of its parts, all of its components working in tandem. So that for sale card, which you can see is first cab off the rank here, we want to put that under the front doors in context. Yeah. In the first week, under the front doors. So people would look at that and they go, gee, that's labor intensive. Yes, it is. Would I create labor that was unnecessary? No. Does it then become a vital component to success? Yes. Yes. Because by putting them under the front doors, we're significantly increasing the chance of it being a standout and someone coming home, opening their front door and seeing it right in front of them. Yes, they pick it up. Yes, they throw it away. And you might be thinking that's annoying or otherwise. I don't think so. It's certainly not to a seller. On the whole, when somebody needs you, yes, when they need a real estate agent, they will quickly switch onto that agent that has had the most presence for many years. So that, yeah, is labor intensive and it takes a long time. We then ask you to engage in some initial calls to private sellers, to for sale by owners. And again, I'll be breaking down all of the components that you do on this week by week, starting with next week. Yeah. Then you go, and at the same time, the second week, you go and now drop them, all those again, this time straight into the letterbox. We're back onto the to let by owners and potential promotional signs on property managements. Hopefully by then you've had this conversation. That's why I put it in this call, put it in this video, I should say. That you now had words with those landlords and maybe secured a couple of them on main arterial roads. You then in week 3 have a break from putting the sign card out, but we then start to move into what we call fat boys and so on. The cards come back in week 4, but again, by week 3, you will be seeing other agents' signs in that area. So their competition and the listings that they have. And we have a promotional initiative where you put cards and stuff around those signs, and it will lead to sellers that are in the immediate vicinity of that competitor's listing contacting you and jumping on board with you. Again, by week 4, we're putting them back into the letterbox, and by now people are starting to see your presence significantly lifted up of the brand and indeed you in that particular area, and you'll find that people will start to then call you in as a consideration of real estate agent. And it just goes on. I can break this down step by step, but what you will see is as the plan progresses, we start to move into some blue activity, which is traction, which means we are getting listings. And by the end of week 12, just about everything is in the blue, and you're moving into that traction phase of turning one listing into two into four, and so on. So in the plan, and this is the real point today, and something I ask you to totally embrace, is the way this plan has been set up. It prioritizes the actions that simply must be completed on a daily basis. You do not deviate from that. You can go ahead of that if you're a bit of a thrill seeker. But of course, if you go ahead of those numbers, make sure you don't leave yourself in a position where you'll forget to make it up tomorrow because you've done too much. I cannot stress this enough. One of the great things about putting a plan together, it creates something that will work. And most of that is built around having a consistency of delivery, of building that presence, so that you just stick to this plan. If it's not working, I have no trouble with us rethinking it, none whatsoever, coming back and saying we have to scrap the plan, rethink it, and change the plan to suit the goal. But if you do contact me, which you are welcome to do, I will be questioning whether or not you've followed this plan to the nth degree. That is the most important component, ensuring that you're delivering on this, because I've yet to find anyone that said, I'm not having any success, that's following every component inside the plan. All right. Well, that's it for this week's installment. The recording will be with you, as will the recording of last week and the link that runs with it. And I'll be sure to catch you next week. Yes, same time on the same link that you've registered for Property Careers Prospector School online.